Welcome back, guys. In today's episode, I'm sharing 8 true disturbing stories about home alone in the Blue Ridge Mountains. These are stories from people who stayed alone in remote cabins deep in the Blue Ridge Mountains and encountered things they couldn't explain. So make sure to hit that like and subscribe button, share this with your friends, and let me know where you're watching from. Thanks. Now let's get into it. I was 32 when I rented this cabin way out in the Blue Ridge Mountains. I'd been putting off finishing a manuscript for months, and my editor had stopped being polite about it. I was late on rent, behind on everything, and figured maybe the only way I'd get it done was to disappear for a while, cut off all distractions, lock myself in with just my laptop and some snacks, and power through. The cabin was about 1.5 miles off this narrow, twisting road not far from the Virginia-North Carolina line. I found it on one of those weird little vacation rental sites that look like they haven't been updated since 2004. The photos were fuzzy and didn't show much, just a basic A-frame tucked into the trees. It had 2 bedrooms, a small kitchen, and a porch with a swing. No Wi-Fi. No TV. That was actually what sold me. I figured if there was nothing to watch and nowhere to scroll, I'd finally have to focus. I got there late on a Friday afternoon. The sun was already dipping behind the trees when I pulled into the gravel lot. It was quieter than I expected. Not just peaceful, quiet in that way that almost feels staged. No wind, no birds, just the hum of my car cooling down after I shut it off. I unloaded everything and made some dinner. Just heated up some chili from a can, nothing fancy. The place had this old stove with the coil burners that smelled like burnt dust when it heated up. By the time I ate, cleaned up, and poked around the place a little, it was full-on dark outside. Couldn't see anything past the tree line. The first night was fine, normal stuff. A few odd creaks, the occasional branch brushing the roof, but nothing that set off alarms. I stayed up working on the manuscript for a few hours, added maybe 1,000 words, then crashed on the couch under this stiff old blanket I found in the hall closet. It was the second night when things shifted. I woke up around 2:30 a.m. to this sound. Gravel, crunching. Not a rustle, not an animal. Tires. Slow, deliberate. Like someone easing a car up the driveway. I sat up right away. The windows were shut, but the cabin was dead silent, so the sound came through clean. I listened, waiting for headlights to sweep through the trees or flash across the walls. Nothing. I got up and moved toward the front window. I didn't stand in front of it, just kind of edged to the side so I could peek out without being obvious. From that angle, I couldn't see much, just trees, the faint outline of the gravel path. The sound had already stopped. No engine, no doors opening, no footsteps. I stood there for a while, long enough that I started to feel stupid, and then just went back to bed. Told myself maybe it was a deer or something heavy-footed, but I didn't really believe that, and I didn't fall asleep. The next morning, coffee in hand, I walked the driveway. Just to reassure myself I'd been hearing things. But I wasn't. About 30 feet down from the cabin, I saw 2 tire tracks, fresh ones, veering off the gravel and into the brush. There was no road there, just woods. Whoever had driven up had turned off the path deliberately and, parked in the trees? Drove away in reverse? Walked the rest of the way? It made no sense. I turned to go back up, and that's when I saw the boot prints, right under the front window, right where I'd stood hours earlier. Someone had been pacing, just walking back and forth in this tight 6 or 7 step loop. The gravel was disturbed in a pattern like someone had been waiting, thinking, or watching. And the weirdest part? There were no prints walking away, just that loop. I stood there for a long time. I didn't move. I think I was hoping the longer I looked, the more sense it would make. But it didn't. I tried to shake it off. Told myself maybe it was a drunk hunter. Maybe someone took a wrong turn and panicked. But the pacing pattern, that wasn't someone looking for directions. That night, I didn't even pretend to be casual about it. I took the pistol from my bag and put it on the table next to me. I didn't load it, but I kept the clip close by, just in case. I couldn't focus on writing. Every time I tried to get back into the manuscript, my eyes would drift to the windows. I kept flicking the lights on and off. Checked the doors multiple times, even though I had already locked them. I was jumpy and annoyed with myself. Around midnight, I got up to use the bathroom. I was walking back through the kitchen when I caught movement, or maybe just a sense of something, and looked toward the window. There was someone outside, standing in the trees, just far enough back that they were right at the edge of the porch light's reach. Not moving, not waving, not trying to hide, just standing there, watching the cabin. Couldn't make out a face, couldn't tell anything about them except they were tall and still and there. My brain didn't even really process it, my body just dropped. I hit the floor fast and stayed there, heart racing. Then I crawled back to the bedroom, shut the door, turned off the light, and locked it. I sat on the floor with my back to the wall, pistol in my lap. My hand was shaking. I tried to call 911. The call rang twice, then dropped. No service. I sat like that, in the dark, not blinking, barely breathing, for almost 4 hours. I watched the sliver of light under the door and waited for it to change. For footsteps. A shadow, anything. Eventually, light started to come in through the blinds. Morning. I got up, slowly, opened the front door. The figure was gone, but the boot prints were back, right under the window. Same tight little loop. That morning, I packed everything. Didn't care how it went into the bags, just wanted it ready. But I didn't leave. I know how that sounds. I can't explain it. Maybe part of me still thought I'd imagined it, or that I'd overreacted. Night came again. I stayed. I locked everything, double-checked every door, closed every blind, left every light on in the house. Around 1 a.m., I heard it again, a branch snapping, then another, footsteps behind the cabin, slow, deliberate. I moved to the back door and looked through the peephole. Nothing. Then I remembered the crawl space. There was an access hatch in the hallway floor. I hadn't even thought about it since I got there. I opened it and aimed my flashlight inside. At first it looked like nothing, just dirt, some insulation, old wiring. Then I heard it. A cough. Short. Soft. Like someone trying not to cough. And failing, I slammed the hatch shut, turned the lock, ran back to the bedroom and barricaded the door with a dresser. I didn't hesitate this time. I called 911 again and again until I got through. Told them someone was under the house, that I had a gun, that I didn't know if they were alone. A deputy showed up about 40 minutes later. He came alone, standard SUV, no sirens, just him and a flashlight, and it looked like he already didn't want to be there. He searched the place, then opened the crawl space and went in. He came back up a couple minutes later and just said, "Someone's been down there." He didn't elaborate, just started helping me load my stuff into my car. Down in the crawl space, there was a sleeping bag, some fast food wrappers, a knife in a leather sheath, a cracked flip phone, and a black ski mask folded up like it had been placed there with care. They tried to contact the owner of the cabin, never heard back. I followed the deputy back to the station and stayed in a motel nearby that night. Didn't sleep, just stared at the ceiling, waiting for another cough. 2 weeks later, a detective called, said they hadn't found anyone. The prints didn't match anything, the stuff under the house didn't give them anything useful. I asked about the phone. He said it only had one photo on it, blurry, pixelated, too grainy to make out. It had been taken through glass. That was it. I still have the photo I took of the tire tracks. I don't even know why I keep it. Every once in a while, I open it and zoom in like there's something new to find. I don't write in remote places anymore, and I check every crawl space now. Every single time. Doesn't matter if it's a hotel or an Airbnb or a friend's place. My name's Callie. The cabin used to belong to my cousin Evan's grandfather, but it's just been sitting empty for years. I think the last time anyone actually used it was maybe two and a half years ago, when I told Evan I needed to get away for a bit after finals. Just something quiet, nothing fancy. He offered it without even hesitating. Said I could have it for as long as I wanted. I didn't ask a lot of questions. Honestly, I didn't really care about the details. I just needed to be somewhere other than my apartment, and this sounded perfect. I packed 2 duffel bags, one with clothes and toiletries, the other with food, a first aid kit, a bunch of AA batteries, and a portable charger. I brought a battery lantern, my headlamp, 3 flashlights, and my old Kindle that still had some books downloaded from last semester. I made sure I had matches, extra socks, and this little multi-tool my dad gave me in high school that I never actually used until now. The drive took a little over 4 hours, and once I passed the last gas station about 30 minutes out, I didn't see another car, not one. The cabin was tucked back off this narrow gravel road, surrounded by trees that got thicker the higher I climbed. No signs, no neighbors, no cell towers, nothing. Just a single rusted-out mailbox that said J. Wallace and a driveway so overgrown I almost missed it. As soon as I pulled in and cut the engine, I put my phone on airplane mode. Not because I was trying to be dramatic or anything, it just felt right. Like the whole point of this was to unplug, clear my head, sleep without the glow of my laptop, breathe actual mountain air for once. And the place was exactly what I'd pictured, super basic. 1 room with a lofted bed up a little ladder, a kitchenette with a tiny propane stove, and a bathroom with this loud pump toilet that sort of groaned every time you flushed. Everything smelled like wood, dust, and a bit of mildew, but it wasn't gross, just old, familiar in a weird way, like a cabin in a childhood memory that you can't quite place. Evan had left a propane heater, a couple jugs of drinking water, a sealed bin of canned stuff, and a note on the counter that just said, "Don't open the windows. Use the latch on the door. Enjoy the quiet." I laughed at the window thing. Thought it was a joke. Looking back, it probably wasn't. The first night was uneventful, peaceful even. I made soup, read a few chapters of a book I'd started 6 months ago, and crashed early. No music, no screens. Just quiet, broken only by the occasional pop from the fireplace. The second night was different. I was already in bed, kind of drifting in and out when I heard the doorknob move. It didn't rattle, it wasn't like someone trying to get in, it was just a soft twitch, this tiny metallic creak, like someone barely touched it and let go. I sat straight up, didn't even think about it, just bolted upright, heart already kicking up a notch. I waited, holding my breath, but there was nothing else. No footsteps, no animal sounds, just dead silence. At first, I tried to talk myself down. Maybe the metal shifted, maybe the wood expanded or something. But I've stayed in old cabins before. That's not how this stuff sounds. This wasn't a random creak, it was deliberate. Small, but deliberate. After a minute, I slid out of bed, careful not to make noise, and crossed the cold wood floor barefoot. I turned on my flashlight and shined it through the front window. Porch was empty, no shadows, no movement. I stood there for at least a minute, scanning every inch of the steps and trees beyond. Nothing. Eventually, I shut off the light, crawled back into bed, and stared at the ceiling for hours. At 3:41 a.m., I heard a knock. One knock. It was light, like someone using just a single knuckle. No urgency, just one soft tap directly on the door. I sat up so fast my back cracked. Stared at the door, waiting for a follow-up. Nothing. I didn't call out. Didn't ask who it was. I didn't want to know. I just watched that door for what felt like forever. Eyes watering from not blinking, hands shaking under the blanket. Eventually, I moved to the couch and sat there with the flashlight resting on my knees, aimed at the door. I don't even remember falling asleep. Just woke up with a stiff neck and a dry mouth when the sun started filtering through the trees. At first, I thought maybe I'd imagined the knock. Just stress, nerves, maybe even a dream. Then I opened the front door. There were footprints, bare feet, big, much bigger than mine. You could see the heel in each toe, clearly outlined in the fine layer of pollen and dust on the wooden boards. The middle toe on the left foot was longer than the big toe. Which, look, I know some people have weird feet, but this looked wrong. I stood there staring at them for a long time. What messed with me most was where they ended, halfway down the steps. No turn, no slide off into the dirt, just stopped, like whatever made them vanished mid-step. I shut the door and locked it, double-checked the windows, sat down with a cup of instant coffee, and didn't move for hours. That night, I told myself if anything weird happened again, I'd leave immediately. And then I heard it walking. Started around 1:30 a.m. Heavy steps moving around the cabin. Slow, crunching leaves and twigs as it circled. It would move, then stop, then again, always stopping when I tried to peek out the windows. It knew where the windows were. That's what got me. It wasn't just walking, it was avoiding being seen. I sat on the floor with my back against the kitchen counter, a knife in one hand and my flashlight in the other. I didn't move for hours, just listened to the steps zigzagging around the cabin, not circling, but moving in this weird, broken pattern. When the light started coming in through the windows, I finally exhaled. The fourth day, I packed, threw everything in my bags, ready to leave the second it got dark enough that I could get down the mountain without being seen by whatever this was. But deep down, I didn't leave yet because I needed to see it. I needed to understand what had been walking around me every night. I shouldn't have stayed. I locked every window again, bolted the front door, wedged the old rocking chair in front of it, knife went under my pillow, flashlight beside it. I lay in bed, fully dressed, not planning to sleep. At 2:13 a.m., I woke up, flat on my back, freezing cold, and I immediately knew something was in the room. Breathing, not outside, not through a wall. Inside, it was next to me, low, rasping, wet-sounding breaths. Not fast, just steady, strained. I didn't move. I kept my eyes closed and slid one hand under the pillow, fingers wrapping around the flashlight. My other hand found the knife handle. The breathing got closer. I could feel it on my cheek. Not imagined, not air movement, actual breath on my skin. I opened my eyes and swung the flashlight. Room lit up. No one, but the front door was wide open. Rocking chair shoved halfway across the floor. I jumped up, turned on every light I could, checked the windows, still locked. I grabbed my bag, left everything else, ran barefoot across the porch, down the steps, into the car, peeled out so fast I couldn't even steer properly at first. I didn't stop until I hit a gas station nearly 30 miles away, parked directly under a camera and locked the doors. Sat with the knife on my lap until sunrise. My name's Kyle. I was 22 when I volunteered to spend a weekend alone at my grandparents' old cabin out in the Blue Ridge Mountains. They hadn't been up there in years, not since my grandpa's second stroke. The place had basically been forgotten, like one of those family things everyone keeps meaning to deal with but never quite gets around to. The idea came up during dinner with my parents. My dad mentioned the cabin, said it probably needed checking. You know, make sure the pipes hadn't burst, animals hadn't moved in, that kind of thing. My mom added that I could use some peace and quiet to study, which was generous of her considering I hadn't cracked a textbook in 3 days. I said yes, mostly because I didn't want to deal with my roommate's girlfriend staying over again. She treated our apartment like a hotel she hated, and I couldn't do another weekend of hearing them whisper fight over Spotify playlists. So Friday morning, I threw a bag in the car, grabbed some canned food and extra batteries, and headed out. It was a 3-hour drive, give or take. The last stretch was all single-lane roads that wound through endless trees. My signal dropped about 20 minutes before I got there, which I expected, but still. It hits different when your phone actually says no service, like you've left the planet. The cabin sat right at the edge of a ridge, tucked in behind a bunch of overgrown brush. It had a wide porch that wrapped around one side and a roof that sagged a little more than I remembered. All the windows were covered in this greasy layer of dust that made it look like the place was wearing sunglasses. The front door creaked like a horror movie prop, and the lock stuck just enough to make me pause before it gave way. Inside, it smelled like old wood and something dry and musty. There was a sour note to it, maybe mouse droppings or stale food left behind. I opened every window I could get unstuck and let the air push through. The light switches still worked, but the bulbs gave a sad little flicker before they came on properly. I ran the water in the kitchen, brown at first, then clear. No Wi-Fi, no bars on my phone. I figured I'd treat it like a detox and read a book for once. The first night wasn't bad. I heated up some chili, found a dusty old paperback tucked between two board games, something about Appalachian ghost stories, and skimmed it while curled up on the lumpy couch. I climbed the ladder to the sleeping loft around 11, left the small lamp downstairs on low, more out of habit than anything. That loft was cozy, but in the kind of way that made you notice every sound under the floorboards. At some point past midnight, I woke up to a thump. It wasn't loud, just this solid little knock against the wall. I waited, thinking it might have been the house settling. Then it happened again. Same spot, same kind of thump, not a scratch or a scurry. More like something solid tapping wood. I sat up, heart doing the slow climb in my chest. It was the kind of noise that doesn't feel threatening, exactly, but your body still tightens like it's bracing for a jump scare. I pulled on a hoodie, climbed down the ladder quietly, and stepped over to the window beside the front door. I cupped my hands around my eyes to block the inside light and leaned in. The porch was empty. The woods beyond were just a wall of black. You know how at night sometimes the trees blur together into this single, flat shadow? That's what it was, one big, unbroken shape. I couldn't even tell where the tree line ended. I stood there for a while, watching, waiting for something to shift. Eventually, nothing did, and I went back upstairs. Didn't feel great about it, but I wasn't exactly packing up and driving 3 hours home in the middle of the night either. Second night, I barely even tried to sleep. I kept telling myself I'd imagine the sound. Maybe it was a raccoon or a branch falling. You know, normal stuff. But my brain didn't believe any of that, and neither did my body. So I was already half awake when the footsteps started. Not fast. Not trying to sneak either. Just these deliberate creaks across the porch boards. 1, 2, 3, slow as anything. They moved across from the far end of the deck toward the front door. Then silence. Then this dragging sound. Not metal or cloth, something heavy and rough. It scraped against the boards like someone pulling a tree branch. Or a body. I grabbed the small hatchet Grandpa used to keep near the firewood. It was still hanging on the same nail. I crept down the ladder and kept low, making sure not to step on the creaky parts of the floor. There's a narrow, vertical window right beside the doorknob. I leaned in, tilted just enough to see out without pressing my face to the glass. There was a man standing at the edge of the porch. No clothes, no movement, just standing there, pale as paper. His arms hung straight down, but in this unnatural way, like they weren't attached right, not even using them for balance, just dead weight. I locked the door and backed up into the kitchen, checking every window, every door. I didn't hear him move. I didn't hear him leave. I sat on the couch with the hatchet in my lap. My hands were sweating so much it felt like the handle might slip. I stared at that front window until my eyes dried out. By the time morning came, he was gone. I should have left. I know that. But I didn't want to believe it had really happened. I thought, maybe it was a dream, or I imagined it, or it was a hiker who got lost and somehow forgot his clothes. Yeah, ridiculous, but it was easier than admitting something was really wrong. So I stayed. The third night, I didn't even pretend to sleep. I dragged a chair over to the front door and sat with my grandpa's old bolt-action rifle across my lap. He kept it locked up in a metal chest under the loft bed. I'd found the key during the first night while poking around. That night was different. The air felt wrong, still, empty. No sounds, no wind, no bugs, no owls. Just silence, so thick it made every little creak of the house feel like it echoed. Then, out of nowhere, the back doorknob started rattling. Not soft, it was fast, like someone was twisting it every possible way. I stood up, backed into the kitchen. The knob stopped, then tapped twice. Soft knocks, not fists, just 2 light taps. Then 2 more. Then something scratched the kitchen window. A click. Then another. I leaned to the side and peeked out. Couldn't see anything. And then, footsteps. Again. But this time more than one set. I rushed to the front window and yanked the curtain aside. There were 2 people now. One on the far right corner, just like the night before. The other on the left. Both still. Both naked. Their skin looked gray. Not sick gray. More like concrete left out in the rain. Neither of them faced the window. They just stood there, like statues waiting for instructions. I backed away, heart jackhammering, and climbed to the loft. I needed more ammo. That's when the scratching started again. Along the outer walls, slow, measured. Nails or something sharp dragging across the siding. I tracked it as it moved under the windows, along the deck, and then directly beneath the cabin. I could hear it shifting the floorboards as it passed under them. Then it stopped, right under the living room. Then came the footsteps on the roof. Not loud, just steady. One after the other. Whoever, or whatever it was, they were pacing directly above the loft. They stopped right over my head. I raised the rifle, aimed at the ceiling, and just sat there. Didn't sleep. Didn't blink. I don't know how long I held still like that. My arms started to shake, my back cramped up, but I didn't move until the sunlight started to hit the tops of the trees. When it was bright enough to see clearly, I went outside. The porch was empty, but the dirt around it was torn up. Not like footprints, more like claw marks, deep, narrow gouges. Something had circled the cabin. I didn't stick around to investigate. When I got to the car, I stopped cold. There was a handprint on the hood, not smudged, pressed, like someone had leaned their whole weight onto the metal. The fingers were too long, the nails chipped and uneven. The print left this greasy film on the paint, like oil and sweat and something else. I got in and drove, no stops, no checking the rear view. I didn't slow down until I hit the highway and my phone finally found a signal. I called my dad and told him I heard animals, that the place was too quiet to sleep. He didn't ask questions. 2 days later, he went up to close the place down. When he got back, we stopped for gas. He didn't look at me for a while. Then he said he found something weird under the porch. Clothes, ripped up jeans, a work shirt, part of a jacket, all shredded, all stained. Some pieces had bite marks, big ones, human-sized. He said he threw it all away. Then he looked at me and said, calm and serious, "Don't go back there alone." Since then, I haven't gone back since. My name's Nicole. I was 28 when I moved into the cabin. It wasn't meant to be permanent or anything, just a break. My great-aunt Lena passed away that April. Stroke, I think. And she left behind this creaky old log cabin out in Monroe Ridge, right on the edge of the Virginia-Tennessee border. Nobody else in the family wanted it. Most of them hadn't spoken to her in years. I was the only one who bothered to show up at the funeral. So when they read the will, the lawyer just looked at me, then slid the key across the table like we were closing a deal at a pawn shop. At the time, I was floating. I just quit my job as a data analyst in DC after a bad meeting with a worse boss. I didn't have a backup plan, and my apartment lease was up in a week, so the cabin felt like a weird kind of life raft. I thought, maybe I'd fix the place up, use the time to figure things out, get off the grid, do some thinking, find myself, or whatever people on Instagram say when they go hiking for a weekend. The place looked like it hadn't been touched in years. 2 bedrooms, slanted porch, windows so dusty you couldn't see through them. The inside smelled like cedar and mildew. A layer of grime covered everything like a film. No cell signal, no internet, no cable. The only amenity was a wood stove that looked like it had opinions. Still, it felt manageable. I brought a duffel bag with some clothes, a box of groceries, my laptop, even though I knew I wouldn't use it, and a stack of books I'd been meaning to read for years. There was something kind of refreshing about knowing no one could reach me unless they hiked for 30 minutes and knew which tree to turn at. The first couple of days were uneventful. I cleaned, I patched up a leaking faucet, got the stove working. It was quiet, sure, but not eerie quiet. Just absence of noise. I'd lie in bed and notice my own breathing. I could hear the walls creak with temperature shifts, hear the fridge kick in like it was clearing its throat. It was a different kind of normal. By day 4, I stopped locking the front door at night. Not out of carelessness, it just didn't seem necessary. The nearest neighbor was miles away. You couldn't even see the cabin from the road, and the trail leading up to it was barely more than a deer path. Still, I always closed my bedroom door when I went to sleep. Some habits from city living die hard. By the 7th night, I was in a rhythm. Wake up with the sun, do some repairs, cook a lazy dinner, and read until my eyes gave out. That night, I was deep into Blood Meridian, which probably wasn't the best choice for someone alone in a cabin, but the writing is insane, so I stuck with it. Around midnight, I put the book down, reached over, and clicked off the lamp. Or I thought I did. Somewhere around 2, I jolted awake. Total darkness. I looked over at the clock on the nightstand, and it was blank. No light, no numbers, just dead plastic. My eyes tried to adjust, but there was nothing to adjust to. It was the kind of dark that makes you feel like your own limbs are too far away. I reached for the lamp, flipped the switch. Nothing. Tried the ceiling light, still dead. Okay, power outage. Annoying, but not terrifying. Old wiring, probably. I got out of bed, barefoot, padded toward the kitchen to check the fuse box or maybe grab a flashlight. That's when I saw it. The front door was wide open, just standing there. No breeze, no noise. Open like someone had walked in gently and left it that way. I stopped in the hallway and stared at it, trying to piece it together. Had I left it open? No, I knew I'd shut it. It had this clunky metal latch that you had to jiggle a little. I would have remembered. But maybe it hadn't caught. Maybe the door warped in the night. I took a step forward slowly. My eyes were adjusting now, and I could make out the faint outlines of trees and moonlight beyond the door frame. Then I saw the footprints. On the floor, leading from the door to the kitchen table. Bare feet, not mine. These were longer, wider. Smudged, like they'd been dipped in fireplace ash. Not wet, not muddy, just dark. They stopped right at the chair I usually sat in to eat. That's when I backed up. One slow step, then another. I didn't even check the rest of the cabin. I turned, went straight back into the bedroom, locked the door, and sat down on the floor with my back against it. That drawer by the bed where I'd stashed a kitchen knife just in case suddenly didn't feel so silly. I stayed like that until the sun came up. At some point, I must have drifted off because when I opened my eyes, there was daylight coming through the cracks in the door frame. My legs were numb. My back felt like it had been stepped on, but I stood up and opened the door. The front door was closed, locked even, deadbolt turned. I walked into the kitchen. The footprints were gone, not smeared or faded, just gone, like someone had come in with polish and erased them. I hadn't cleaned that floor since I got there. I checked every room, opened every drawer, looked under the bed, in closets, up in the attic, crawl space, even crouched down and lifted the trap door to the crawl space under the house where it smelled like copper pipes and mold. Nothing. Later that morning, the power came back. I didn't call anyone, didn't report an outage, just sat on the couch with every lamp turned on and the TV playing static until it picked up a channel. That night, I didn't sleep. I stayed fully dressed, shoes on, knife within reach. Just sat on the couch, staring down the hallway. At 2:13 a.m., the power cut again. No flicker, just gone. I didn't move, didn't blink. 15 minutes later, the floorboards creaked. Once, then again, from the hallway. Then I heard the doorknob on my bedroom turn, slowly, carefully. That didn't make sense. I'd left it open. The hinges groaned. I couldn't see anything, just heard something. One step, maybe two. Then silence. No breathing, no movement, just total, perfect quiet. Eventually the sun rose, the lights came back. I stood up on shaky legs and looked. The door was half closed. That was it for me. I packed in 10 minutes. Phone, wallet, charger, one change of clothes. Left the laptop, the food, everything else. Didn't even shut the front door. I just walked, fast, down the trail to where I'd parked, next to the shed that looked like it'd fall over in a stiff wind. I was about halfway to the car when I heard it, a voice right behind me. Not whispering, not yelling, just plain, "Don't go." I turned so fast I nearly tripped. No one there, didn't matter. I ran the rest of the way, drove straight to a motel off Route 11, checked in with cash, and crashed, with every light on and cartoons playing loud enough to drown out my own heartbeat. I didn't tell anyone for weeks, and even when I did, just some guy at a hardware store when I went to buy a padlock. I said it like a joke, like, "You ever feel like maybe your dead aunt forgot to mention the haunted part?" He didn't laugh, just looked up and said, "Which ridge?" I told him, "Monroe Ridge." He didn't flinch, just nodded and said, "You saw it too, huh?" I was 28 when I agreed to house sit for my Uncle Greg in a cabin way out near Smoky Ridge. His place was about as isolated as you can imagine. 45 minutes of narrow, climbing roads that made your stomach dip, followed by a long, bumpy, gravel driveway that dropped so steep you had to throw the car into low gear just to keep control. My ears popped every single time I hit that last stretch. Greg and my Aunt Clara had retired out there maybe 5 years before. Greg used to joke that the silence was aggressive, and that was exactly why he liked it. No one to bother them, nothing to distract from the trees, the trails, and the quiet. When they told me they were going on a 10-day cruise down the Danube, he called me up and offered to pay me to stay at the house, walk their old yellow lab Buster, water the vegetable beds, and, his exact words, keep the coyotes from chewing the porch to splinters. I'd just left a job I hated and hadn't lined up the next one yet, so honestly the timing worked out. Plus, free food, quiet, and a paycheck? I was in. The first few days were honestly kind of great, peaceful. I'd wake up early, make coffee in their weird old percolator, and sit by the big front window while the morning light cut through the trees. I walked Buster down their loop trail every afternoon. He was old but still strong, still excited about every rustling leaf, like it might be a squirrel. Once it got dark, I stayed inside. Not out of fear, just habit. It got pitch black past sunset, and I didn't want to twist an ankle stepping off a porch I couldn't see. They had this reading nook with a little lamp and a pile of dog-eared paperbacks. I rotated between that and their DVD collection. Lots of old westerns and a surprising number of nature documentaries. I made tea, curled up under a blanket, listened to the house creak and settle. It was kind of perfect, until night 6. That night, I was just getting ready for bed. Brushed my teeth, turned off the bathroom light, walked past Buster lying in his usual spot by the fireplace. But then he jumped up. No stretch, no groan, just straight up and into a low growl. Then the barking started. Not panicked, but loud, deep, focused. He was fixed on the back door like he could see something I couldn't. I tried to calm him down, but he didn't even blink. Just kept growling, lips curled, eyes locked on that door. I grabbed a flashlight and stepped out onto the porch, even though everything in me was saying, "This is stupid." I swung the beam across the yard, left to right, then again, nothing, just trees and more trees. The air was dead still, no wind, no owl sounds, just quiet. But when I turned around to go back in, Buster was inside, staring out at me through the window, ears pinned back, mouth pulled tight, not barking anymore, just watching. I slept with the light on, knife on the nightstand. Didn't really sleep, to be honest. The next morning, I skipped the trail. Didn't feel like being in the woods. I stayed close to the house. Read for a bit, played tug-of-war with Buster, made a sandwich I didn't finish. I kept glancing out the windows like something was going to pop up from behind a tree, but nothing ever did. Then came night 7. It was exactly 3:17 a.m. when I woke up. Not from a dream, not randomly. Something had clicked. Literally, the sound was unmistakable. The front doorknob turning. Click, pause, click again. Not fast, not jerky, just slow, careful turns, like someone testing it, seeing if it would give. My chest tightened like I'd been punched. Click, then nothing. A few seconds later, 3 knocks. Not loud, spaced out. Almost polite, I guess? That made it worse somehow. I got out of bed without turning on any lights. Buster wasn't barking. He was lying in the hallway like he'd been awake too. Totally still, head up, ears twitching, but not making a sound. It was like he knew something I didn't. I grabbed my phone. No service. Typical. I crept toward the door, whispered, "Who's there?" Nothing. I leaned closer, pressed my ear against the wood, and then I heard it, breathing, right on the other side, close enough to fog the glass if they'd tried. It was uneven, raspy, the kind of breathing that sounds spent, like they'd been running for a while, or crying. I backed away so fast I almost tripped over Buster, ran to the kitchen, pulled open drawers until I found the biggest knife they owned. I turned off the lights and crouched behind the kitchen island, heart pounding in my ears. I don't know how long I sat there. Eventually, I tiptoed over to the peephole, looked through. It was black. Not nightback, solid, as if someone had their palm pressed over the other side. I didn't sleep that night either. By morning, when it was finally bright enough, I opened the door. Nothing outside. But around the lock, there were these little scratches, thin and jagged, like someone had been jabbing at it with a pin or nail. I circled the property. No footprints, no broken branches, nothing. But I couldn't shake the feeling that someone had been standing in those trees, watching me. That night, I didn't even bother with pajamas. I stayed dressed, sitting in the living room with all the lights on and a knife on my lap. I remembered there was this dusty emergency radio in the attic and pulled it down just in case. At 1:20 a.m., I heard them again, footsteps on the porch. No sneaking this time, just slow, heavy steps. They stopped right at the door, and then the breathing started again. Same as before, close, deliberate, right on the other side. I didn't speak, didn't move. Buster stayed curled in the corner like he was trying to disappear. Then the knob turned, once, then again. Then something slid under the door. I stared at it, just a piece of folded paper. I waited a solid minute before picking it up. On it, in big, clumsy block letters, it said, "I saw you move in. You're not them." I grabbed the radio and called for help. My hands were shaking so bad I could barely press the button. Eventually, a woman answered. County dispatch. I told her someone was outside the house trying to get in. She said they'd send a deputy, but it could take up to an hour. "Stay inside and don't engage," she said. At 2:30, the backyard gate creaked open, then footsteps on the rear deck. That's when I realized I'd never bolted the back door. Just shut it. The knob turned. The door opened. I froze. Buster growled low and followed me as I backed into the bathroom and locked us inside. I sat down against the door, knife in one hand, radio in the other. The footsteps entered the kitchen. I moved down the hallway, stopped outside the bedroom. Then my door, the handle jiggled. Once, twice. I stood up, took a breath, and kicked it open as hard as I could. They barely moved. They were standing there in a white mask, blank, plastic-looking hoodie pulled up. No shoes, just watching me. I screamed and swung the knife, not to hit, just to startle. They bolted, silent, out the back into the woods. The deputy showed up about 20 minutes later. We looked around and found barefoot prints on the deck. Size 12, maybe? Then about 30 yards into the trees, we found a little camp, just a sleeping bag stuffed between some boulders, hidden under branches, a water bottle, torn pants, a few granola bar wrappers. They knew the house, knew I was alone, knew the exact night I forgot to lock the back door. Next morning, I packed up and left. So, my name's Lena, and last October I stayed alone for 7 days at my uncle's cabin in the Blue Ridge Mountains. Well, that was the plan anyway. I ended up lasting about 4. The cabin's up a ridge road, about half an hour from this tiny little place called Whitaker Hollow. Now, calling it a town is pretty generous. There's a gas station, a post office that's basically the size of a closet, and a bar that doesn't open until after 4 in the afternoon. That's it. My uncle bought the land back in the 70s, and he built the cabin himself, with help from a cousin who passed away in '92. No one's lived there full-time since then. I wasn't there for a vacation, though. I'd just gotten laid off from my job at a nonprofit in Atlanta. They sent me an email. Just like that, no heads up, no warning, nothing. I had bills piling up, no backup plan, and way too much free time. So my uncle, being the good guy that he is, offered me the cabin as a place to reset or whatever. Fresh air, no internet, he said. It'll do you good. Now you'd think I'd be excited, right? A cabin in the mountains, away from everything, time to clear my head. But I was just so, I don't know, lost. My head was spinning with everything that had happened. So I took him up on it. He gave me directions over the phone, left at the rusted tractor, right at the mailbox with the bullet holes, and I wrote them down, with little drawings to make sense of it all. GPS completely gave up on me 5 miles before I hit the turnoff, so there I was, driving down this winding dirt road with no signal, watching the sun drop lower behind the trees. When I finally reached the cabin, it looked smaller than I remembered. Log walls, 2 windows in front, and a chimney that leaned just a little too far to the left. It looked like the kind of place someone would take a photo of and say, "Look at this cozy little cabin." But in that moment, all I could think was, I'm really doing this. I didn't pack much, just a cooler with food, bottled water, a sleeping bag, some books, a solar lantern, and a prepaid flip phone. The kind of phone that barely worked unless I stood on the porch at a very specific angle. I'd gotten the landline working, but it only worked for local calls. The thing is, I didn't know anyone locally. So, there I was, cut off from the world, completely alone. The first couple of days were, weirdly peaceful. It was so quiet. I mean, I'd expected it to be quiet, but this kind of silence was different. No cars driving by, no neighbors, just the sounds of squirrels and the wind through the trees, the occasional low groan from the trees themselves, but that was it. I went for a walk on the second morning and came across this deer spine. It was picked clean, like something had gone at it with a vengeance. The ribs were all sticking up like someone had tried to put it back together but got it all wrong. My first thought was coyotes. They tend to do that kind of thing, right? I didn't want to poke around. I just left it and kept walking. By the third day, the silence was starting to get to me, more than I expected. I wasn't really prepared for how alone I would feel. I started talking out loud, just to fill the space, narrating everything I was doing like I was on some reality show that no one was ever going to watch. Chopping kindling, lighting the stove, reheating beans. It was a little ridiculous. The light from the lantern made the inside of the cabin look all soft and faded, like one of those old yellowed photos. It wasn't a terrible feeling, just kind of surreal. But then, that third night, I woke up to a knock. It didn't come from the door, it came from the wall, specifically the wall next to the bathroom mirror. I figured I'd imagined it, but my heart was already pounding in my chest. I laid there, frozen, listening, waiting. There was nothing, just the sound of my own breathing. I stayed there for a full 10 minutes, holding my breath, before I finally decided to get out of the sleeping bag and see what was going on. I didn't go outside. I didn't even open the curtains. I just walked from room to room, flashlight in hand, peering out through the cracks in the boards like I was some paranoid investigator. I didn't see anything. But after that, I started locking both the front and back doors every night. Not because I was convinced someone was out there. Who would be? But honestly, I didn't know what I was thinking. There was no rational thought. Just this weird pressure building up in my chest, like I had to check the locks over and over. 3 times, 4, 5, before I finally crawled into bed. It wasn't fear, it was just something I couldn't explain, something that felt off. The next night, it knocked again. Same wall, same spot, right under the bathroom mirror. One knock, then nothing, complete silence. I tried to tell myself I was just imagining it, that maybe it was the wind or a branch scraping against the side of the house. But that didn't make sense either. The side of the cabin that the knock came from faced the slope, with no stairs, no ledge, no reason for something to be back there. So I did what anyone would do. I pressed my hand against the wall. Cold, but nothing moved. I stood in the bathroom for 15 minutes, staring at the paneling, listening for anything. Just a creak, a shuffle, anything. Then I heard a floorboard creak outside the bathroom. Just one, my stomach dropped. I spun around, flashlight shaking in my hand, but there was nothing there. No footsteps, no movement, just the floor groaning. I didn't sleep that night. The flashlight stayed on, sitting next to the knife I'd placed on the side table. I didn't dare close my eyes. The shadows on the ceiling kept shifting, and every sound, every creak of the wood felt like something was just waiting for me to look away. The next morning, I drove into Whitaker Hollow to pick up a few things at the general store. The guy behind the counter was older, maybe in his 60s. He had this gray braid and a jacket that said Jeb on it. I asked him if they had any bear spray. He told me no and then just looked at me for a second, like he was trying to figure something out. Finally, he asked, "You up at the Ridge cabin?" I nodded. I didn't think much of it. He scratched his chin and said, "You lock your doors at night?" I was kind of thrown off by the question. "Yeah," I said. "Of course I do." "Good," he replied. That was it. No smile, no explanation, just those 2 words. I bought a few things, more candles, batteries, and a padlock for the tool shed. But the whole time, he just rang me up in silence. When I stepped outside, I considered asking him about the cabin, if there were any stories or anything, but something in his eyes made me stop. I don't know why, but I felt like I didn't want to know. Back at the cabin, I double-checked all the locks, moved the dining table in front of the back door, pulled the dresser into the hallway to block off the bathroom. I set up a string of empty cans across the front porch like some kind of alarm system. The cans would make noise if anyone tried to approach. It knocked again at 1:43 a.m. I remember looking at my phone and seeing the time. This time, it was from a different wall, right under the loft stairs. Just one knock. Then, silence. I didn't move. I just lay there, holding the knife with both hands. Then, 5 minutes later, another knock. This time from the kitchen, right outside the window. Then another, from back at the bathroom. One knock at a time, spaced out, like it was circling the cabin. But the cans on the porch didn't move. There were no footsteps, no sound of anything coming closer. Just those knocks, one after another, always from different places. Like it wanted me to know exactly where it was at all times. And then, the generator stopped. No sputter, no fade out, just dead silence. The battery-powered lantern stayed on, but I was too scared to use it. I sat there shaking, listening to the wood groan under its own weight. Then, something tapped on the front window. I looked up. For a second, just a blink, I saw a hand against the glass. 5 fingers, too far apart, pale and almost skeletal. It slid down, out of view, before I could even move. I didn't sleep that night. At dawn, I grabbed my keys, my phone, and the flashlight, and I ran out of that cabin. I didn't pack a single thing, didn't grab any food, didn't even shut the door behind me. I walked down the gravel driveway until I could get enough signal to call for a ride. When I reached the paved road, I stood under the crooked speed limit sign and waited. My uncle picked up on the first ring. I told him I left early, that I didn't want to be alone up there anymore. Before he hung up, though, he said something that made my stomach twist. "It never comes inside, Lena, not unless you talk to it." Then the line went dead. My name's Ben, and I was 33 when I made the brilliant decision to spend a long weekend alone in the mountains with no cell service, minimal human contact, and a big deadline. At the time, it felt like a great idea. I'd been slammed with editing gigs and needed to knock out this one wedding video that had been sitting in my queue for weeks. The couple had offered a bonus if I could finish early, and I figured getting out of town would help me focus. No distractions, no notifications, no excuses. Just me, my laptop, and a thermos full of black coffee. The place I booked was this remote A-framed cabin about 2 hours outside Boone, North Carolina. The listing made it look like something straight out of a furniture catalog. Massive windows, exposed beams, open kitchen, big deck wrapping around the whole place. The reviews were all glowing. A few people mentioned it was pretty isolated, but I liked the sound of that. I was thinking, peace and quiet, not whatever this turned into. The drive up was no joke. The last stretch was basically just gravel and blind curves. I must have passed 5 different warning signs about steep grades and falling rocks. My phone lost signal halfway through the drive, and by the time I made it to the final stretch of driveway, which was more like a vertical ramp, I had to reverse halfway down and gun it just to get the car out. I pulled in around 5. The sun was already slipping behind the trees. It wasn't dark yet, but it was getting close. When I stepped out of the car, the quiet hit me like a wall. No birds, no bugs, no wind, just the sound of my boots crunching the gravel. I stood there for a second, keys in my hand, and thought, okay, this is a little eerie, but fine. You're being dramatic. The cabin itself was spotless. The key was under the mat like the owner said, and everything inside was neatly arranged. Full kitchen, fresh linens, little welcome note on the counter with a Ziploc bag of trail mix and a bottle of water. I did a quick lap. Checked closets, opened cabinets, turned on all the lights. Just out of habit, really. I sat up at the dining table facing the big window that overlooked the forest and spent a couple hours organizing footage. Ordered pizza would have been nice, but I had a stack of frozen meals and a plan. By midnight, I was getting ready for bed when I heard something outside. It wasn't loud, just this steady crunch of footsteps on gravel. I paused, toothbrush halfway to my mouth, and leaned toward the open window above the sink. It was definitely footsteps. Slow, heavy, coming up the driveway. Then they stopped. Right below the window, I froze. Didn't breathe. Waited for some kind of sound. A voice, another step, anything. But it went dead silent. I looked down through the window. Nothing, just gravel. I waited another minute, listening hard. Still nothing. Eventually I laughed, rinsed my mouth, and chalked it up to being in my own head. Long drive, weird silence, etc. I left the upstairs light on and crashed on the couch, with the TV playing some cooking show on low. Next morning, everything seemed fine. Bright light, birds chirping, no signs of late-night visitors. I felt a little stupid for getting so spooked. I got deep into the edit that day. The footage was honestly some of the best I'd shot. Mountaintop vows, slow dances under string lights, even a drone shot that panned across the ridge right at golden hour. I was so focused that I didn't even notice how quickly the sun was dropping. At some point in the late afternoon, I caught a flicker of motion outside. Just a quick blur at the edge of the trees. I paused the timeline and leaned closer to the glass. That's when I saw him. There was a man standing about 50 feet from the house, right at the tree line. He wasn't moving. He was wearing jeans, a black hoodie, and something about his posture made it clear he wasn't lost. He was watching the cabin. Watching me. I stood up, walked to the door, stepped out onto the deck. No sound, no movement, just empty woods. I called out, "Hey, you all right out there?" I even jogged down to the edge of the trees and looked around. No answer. The ground was soft from recent rain, so I expected to see footprints, but there was nothing. I checked twice. Then I went back inside and locked every door and window. That night, I tried to sleep, I really did. But around 2 a.m., I was jolted awake by these sharp metallic pops from the back deck. I jumped off the couch and grabbed my phone. The porch light was off, but I crept over to the sliding glass door with my flashlight. That's when I saw it. A handprint smudged right in the middle of the glass. Greasy, fresh, and unmistakably human. I stared at it for a few seconds, just standing there, then relocked the door and backed away. I grabbed the biggest kitchen knife I could find and went upstairs, locked the bathroom door. Sat on the floor with my back against it. I didn't sleep, just waited for daylight. When the sun finally came up, I checked every inch of the property. No signs of a break-in, no tracks, no tools, no broken branches. Just that handprint. I almost packed up right then. I even loaded my laptop and camera back into my case. But I stopped halfway. Part of me didn't want to feel like I'd been scared off. I told myself I was being ridiculous, that it was probably a prank. I had one night left. I should have left. That last night, I stayed up late editing, trying to distract myself. At 1:47 a.m. on the dot, every motion light outside came on, all at once. Like someone had tripped all the sensors. I sat up straight, my laptop screen lit up too. I'd left the webcam running by accident, recording a time-lapse for the sunrise. I clicked play. There were 3 people outside. 3. They moved slowly, circling the house. Each of them wore a white mask, hand-painted like a skull, with black slits where the eyes should have been. They didn't knock, didn't say a word, just moved in this steady, chilling loop around the cabin. At one point, one of them looked directly into the camera. I paused the video and tried to call the sheriff's office through Wi-Fi. The signal barely held, but I got through. Told the dispatcher I was alone and there were people outside. She said the closest deputy was 45 minutes away and told me to stay hidden. Then the power cut, total darkness. No Wi-Fi, no lights, no heat, and then footsteps, gravel shifting. Slow, careful steps circling the house again, then tapping. On the windows, 3 separate taps, 3 different parts of the house. I didn't even think. I grabbed the knife again, climbed into the upstairs closet, shoved a chair under the attic door, and pulled myself up. I lay there in the attic, heart pounding, every muscle tense. I didn't hear them leave. I didn't know if they'd gotten inside. I just waited, gripping the knife and staring at the hatch below. Eventually, finally, gravel again. But this time it was tires. A car door slammed. And then I heard a voice. "Sheriff's Department, step outside with your hands visible." I climbed down, ran barefoot to the window. A deputy was out there, flashlight in hand. I ran out, shaking, trying to explain what had happened, but I could barely form a sentence. He didn't say much, just walked and left. My name's Eric, and I was 24 when I agreed to dog sit for my aunt and uncle at their cabin in the Blue Ridge Mountains. They'd built the place about 3 years earlier, near a ridge just south of Mount Lorne, way out past anything resembling civilization. I remember the first time I visited. My phone lost signal 20 minutes before we even turned off the main road. Their cabin didn't show up properly on GPS. You had to drive past this old ranger station that looked half abandoned, then take a gravel road with no sign except a tilted wooden post that just said, "Pie Road" in faded paint. That road dipped and twisted through heavy trees for almost 2 miles before opening into a small clearing. It always felt like the kind of place that wasn't supposed to be found. I'd been there twice before, once for Thanksgiving where we all crammed into the living room eating pie and avoiding politics. The second time was the summer after that when they asked me to help stain their back deck. That trip stuck with me more. I remember how unsettling the quiet was once the sun went down. There were no distant cars, no buzz of streetlights, just woods pressing in on every side. It wasn't creepy exactly, just isolating. in a way that made you notice your own heartbeat. They were heading out to a wedding in Oregon, some college friend of my aunt's, and asked if I could stay from Thursday to Monday morning to watch their golden retriever, Max. 4 nights, easy stuff. They stocked the fridge, left clean sheets in the guest room, and told me to relax. Throw the ball for Max, maybe hike down to the creek trail if I felt up for it. Just don't let him eat any wildlife. I rolled up around noon that Thursday. They were already packed and looked like they were halfway out the door. My uncle handed me a spare key, gave me the usual pet sitter rundown, dry food in the blue bin, meds and cheese slices, front door sticks a little when it's humid, and they pulled out not long after. I remember standing on the porch after they left, hearing nothing but rustling leaves and Max sniffing around the steps. It felt weirdly peaceful, like I'd accidentally stepped out of the world for a few days. That first night was nothing. I heated up a sad frozen pizza, tossed Max's tennis ball down the hallway until he got tired, then curled up on the couch with some downloaded movies. Around midnight, I went to brush my teeth, planning to crash early. That's when I noticed Max sitting by the front door. He wasn't dozing or just chilling there. He was perfectly still, like he'd been frozen mid-step. His body was tense, ears perked, just staring through the front door's window. I walked over and looked out, expecting a deer or maybe a fox on the gravel path. The porch light was on, lighting up a whole lot of nothing. Just trees and shadows. "Max," I said, unlocking the door. "You need to pee, or what?" He didn't move until I clipped his leash on. Then he sniffed the air once and suddenly yanked toward the right side of the house, toward the tree line. Not an excited tug. It was firm, deliberate, like he knew something was out there. "Absolutely not," I said, pulling him back toward the driveway. He dug in for a few seconds, then gave up and peed like normal near the gravel. I brought him back in, locked up, didn't think much of it, just a false alarm, right? Next morning, I walked out to the back deck with coffee. That's when I saw it, a rock, sitting in the dead center of the top step, smooth and round like a river stone. No moss, no dirt, no twigs stuck to it. Just clean. Too clean. It didn't match the gravel from the driveway or any of the stones I'd seen on the property. I picked it up. It was cold and slightly damp, like it had been underwater 10 minutes earlier. I tossed it over the railing without thinking. Probably just a weird landscaping leftover or something. Whatever. Day 2 was a lazy one. I half read a book, made a grilled cheese that somehow ended up burnt and cold at the same time, threw the ball around for Max again. Around sunset, I grilled a couple burgers and ate them out on the deck while the sky turned that golden orange color. When I got up to take my plate inside, I froze. Another rock. This one was sitting on the bottom step. It was almost the same size as the first one, but had a dark streak running through the middle, like a stripe of black quartz or something. Just as spotless. Just as placed. I didn't pick it up this time. I just stared at it, then said, loud, to nobody, "Okay, real funny. Enjoy your rock collection." I waited for a squirrel to bolt or something. Nothing moved. I used a napkin to pick it up and brought it inside, dropped it in the kitchen trash and shook it off. Tried to convince myself it was just some weird coincidence. I even looked up what local animals might move rocks. Raccoons? Maybe? Didn't make much sense. Around 2:30 a.m., Max started growling. I was dead asleep in the guest room. His growl was what woke me. Not barking, just this deep, steady rumble that made the air feel different. He was standing at the foot of the bed, body stiff, eyes locked on the closed door. I sat up, heart already going fast, and opened the door slowly. The hallway was dark, silent. Then I heard something. A soft, scraping sound, like wood dragging against something. It came from the living room. I moved down the hall barefoot, holding my breath. The living room was lit by moonlight filtering through the tall windows. I didn't flip the light. I didn't want to let anything or anyone know I was awake. I stepped in and stopped cold. The deadbolt on the front door was unlocked. The chain was still latched, but the bolt itself? Twisted open. I had locked that. I remembered it clearly. I always double-check. I just stared at it for a long time. Then I relocked it, grabbed a flashlight and one of the bigger kitchen knives, and checked every window and door in the place. I even peeked into the crawl space hatch under the stairs. Nothing. Just me and Max. I stayed up the rest of the night. Watched cartoons at low volume until sunrise. By Saturday, I was jumpy. Max could tell. Every time I heard a twig snap outside, I looked out a window. Took him for a walk around noon, sticking close to the cabin. About halfway around the house, he froze again and started growling. Same direction as before, toward the tree line. I didn't wait to see what he was looking at. We went inside. I locked everything. Again, that night I camped on the couch with Max in a blanket. I rigged a chair under the front doorknob and wedged a broom across the back sliding door like some makeshift tripwire. It made me feel slightly less helpless. Slightly. At 4:04 a.m., Max went ballistic. Not toward the front door, toward the hallway, barking like he was ready to kill something. I sat up, heart racing. Then I saw the chair. It had been moved. Not kicked or pushed, moved. Set aside gently. I jumped up, flashlight in hand, ran to the back. The broom was on the floor. The sliding door cracked open just a couple inches. I slammed it shut, locked it, and flipped on every light in the cabin. That's when I saw them. Footprints. Muddy, bare, small, leading from the sliding door to the center of the living room. No matching prints going out, just a beginning. Positive. Max ran to the guest room, barking like mad. I followed him in and froze. On the rug in the middle of the floor was a pile of rocks. 6 of them, all smooth, all clean. I didn't touch them. I grabbed my bag, clipped Max's leash, and ran to the car. Didn't even check if I'd forgotten anything. Backed out fast enough to hit one of those stupid decorative logs by the driveway. I didn't stop driving until I had cell service. Parked at a 24-hour gas station. Sat there until the sky turned light. I never went back. Called my aunt once the sun came up. Told her something personal came up, couldn't finish the weekend. My name's Dan. I was 26 the weekend I locked myself inside a cabin. I thought I knew better than my own reflection. It's my Uncle Paul's place, tucked deep in the Blue Ridge Mountains. You'd never find it unless someone showed you. It's 6 miles off the nearest paved road, and those 6 miles feel more like 60. The gravel road is this mess of craters and old tire ruts, half covered in brush and roots, and it winds like someone drew it drunk. You've got to crawl along in first gear, bouncing over rocks and dodging branches for half an hour just to get close. There's no one around, no other cabins, no gas stations, no nothing. Cell service cuts out before you even reach the turnoff, and there's no electricity except what the solar panels manage to store. But it's quiet. Always had been. That weekend, I was desperate for quiet. I just quit a job that made my skin crawl. Some mind-numbing office gig where even the coffee tasted like resignation. And the breakup I was going through felt like someone had tied strings to my teeth and was slowly yanking them out one by one. Not dramatic, just exhausting. I needed to get somewhere I could breathe without someone else's noise in my ear. So I packed light, a cooler with stuff that wouldn't spoil, some canned chili, fruit, bread, a couple 6-packs, tossed in some clothes, a few paperbacks I kept telling myself I'd read, and drove up late Friday afternoon. By the time I got there, it was already dim outside. The kind of dim that doesn't come from sunset, just from the mountains swallowing light faster than the sky can hold on to it. I unlocked the cabin, aired it out a little, got the wood stove going, made myself a lazy dinner, chili heated in the can, crackers on the side, 2 beers to wash it down. I didn't even bother making the bed, just let the fire do its thing while I laid out on the couch and passed out with a book on my chest. It was probably around 3:30 when I woke up. Not the kind of slow, groggy wake-up where you fight to stay under. This was instant, like a switch had been thrown. I opened my eyes and just stared at the ceiling, not moving, not breathing much. My first thought was that someone had spoken, like a whisper right against my ear. But there was no sound, no echo, no memory of a dream. Just that tight, hard feeling in my chest, like something was off. I turned my head to the stove. The fire had gone low, just embers crackling now. The little clock above it read 3:28 a.m. Then it came. A knock, not loud, not aggressive, just this dry, sharp knock. One, then another, 5 seconds later, exact same rhythm, like someone counting out time. It wasn't coming from the front door. I could tell right away the acoustics were different. It was coming from the back of the cabin, from the deck, which made no sense. There's no path up there. The terrain behind the cabin rises like a wall, rocks, tangled roots, thorny brush. Even I barely go back there. And this was pitch dark, steep as hell, and freezing. I didn't move for a full minute, just lay there listening. My heartbeat was so loud it felt like it was in my ears. Eventually, I stood up. My legs were stiff and shaky, like I'd been holding tension in them without realizing. I walked slow to the kitchen window, the one that overlooks the back deck. Pushed the curtain aside just a little with 2 fingers. There was nothing out there, no one standing, no movement, no beam from a flashlight, just the deck, pale in the moonlight. But the swing was moving. That bench swing's been there forever. Solid wood, thick chains, it takes real force to get it going. But it was swinging, long and slow, like someone had just gotten up. Not rocking from the wind, not shifting from weight. A full, deliberate motion. Forward, back, forward, slowing down now, slower, still. I didn't breathe for a few seconds. Then I backed away from the window, step by step, trying not to make a sound. My foot creaked on a board and I froze all over again. I sat on the couch and didn't turn my back to the window for the rest of the hour. At 5:11 a.m., the smoke detector gave a single chirp. Just one. Not the low battery kind, just a one-time beep. It runs on a battery, independent, doesn't connect to anything else in the cabin. At the same time, the propane heater clicked off. I hadn't touched it. I got up, went to the fuse box. Everything looked fine. Solar battery was full. No blown fuses, no surges. System read normal. Then I heard 3 knocks at the front door. Same cadence, calm, even, like someone asking for something instead of demanding it. I walked up, slow, heart pounding so hard it felt like a hiccup in my chest. Looked through the peephole and saw someone crouched right up against the door. Their head was turned slightly, like they were listening to the wood. No jacket, no hat, just something dark and tight wrapped all the way around their head. Like a scarf or a mask, but without any space for eyes. I couldn't see skin. I couldn't see anything human. I stood there, not moving, my hand clenched around the small hatchet I always keep by the fireplace. Then there was this sound. A scratch. Not fast, not aggressive. Just this long, slow drag of something metal across the door. Right below the handle, like someone was drawing a key across it. Not to open it, just doing it. It stopped. I backed away, ducked into the bedroom, locked the door, and shoved the dresser against it. Then I sat on the floor against the far wall, wrapped a blanket around myself, and held the hatchet in both hands. I didn't sleep, just sat there, blinking in slow motion. Every little sound making my shoulders jump. When the sun came up, I stepped outside. Nothing on the porch. Swing was still. No scratches on the wood. I checked the trail cam above the front door. It had been twisted. The lens was facing into the trees. I didn't touch it. I didn't want to know. And somehow, God knows why, I convinced myself it was probably just stress. A half dream, maybe. My brain mixing exhaustion with a leftover nightmare. I even decided to stay one more night, which was, a special kind of dumb. The whole afternoon passed like nothing had ever happened. I stacked wood, tightened a window screen that had come loose, read half a book without really absorbing a single word. Part of me kept thinking, see, you just needed rest. You've been on edge too long. It was almost midnight when I stepped outside to grab more wood. The forest was dead silent. No leaves moving, no bugs, just this hollow stillness and the sound of my boots crunching over frozen ground. Then I heard another crunch. Not mine. I turned fast. About 15 feet away, between two thin trees, there was someone standing there, barefoot, wearing black. That same dark wrap around the head, tight, no face, no eye holes. They didn't move, didn't twitch, just stood, slightly leaned forward, like they were mid-step when I turned. I dropped the wood and bolted inside, locked the door behind me, turned off every light. Didn't even try calling anyone. The phone was dead weight in my pocket. No bars, no chance. At 1:42 a.m., the smoke alarm chirped again. At 2:03, the swing creaked once. Then I heard a sound along the siding of the cabin, a soft brushing, slow, steady, rising and falling like fingers grazing the wood, moving across the wall, circling the cabin. I couldn't move. I couldn't even blink, just grip the hatchet so tight my knuckles ached. The brushing lasted half an hour. Then it stopped. I sat there in that silence until the first beam of light broke through the cracks in the blinds. I packed everything in less than 2 minutes. Threw my stuff in the back of the car, didn't look at anything, didn't check the cameras. Didn't even close the cabin door. I just got in, turned the key, and tore out down that gravel road like I was trying to outrun my own skin. I never once looked in the rear view, not even when I hit the main road.